What's up, guys? It's been with 2020 election predictions, and today I'm doing a state special focusing on the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is one state that has not gone red in almost 50 years, but I think the Trump campaign sees an opening here. So, in this video, I'll be asking the question: is it really possible for Donald Trump to flip Minnesota? He lost in 2016, as we can see here, but is it possible for him to flip it? The Trump campaign is spending money in Minnesota. Pence and Trump have both been to Minnesota and right kind of on the Wisconsin border here to try to get support. So, is this realistic, or is it just kind of a play, a kind of shot in the dark? So, I'll be answering all those questions here in this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. All right, so let's get going now. So as we can see, in 2016, Minnesota was a lot closer than a lot of people expected. I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't even stop in Minnesota, and Trump didn't even hold many rallies there, just because I mean, the Trump campaign didn't think they could have won. Trump only lost it by 1.5 percentage points, which was less than 50,000 votes. And Trump even said afterwards that he's like, if I could have held one or two more rallies in the state of Minnesota, then he thinks he could have won. But his campaign actually advised him, looking at the internal polls, that it probably wasn't worth it because he wasn't going to win. But just based on how close it was, it probably was worth it. Trump held a lot of rallies in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania in the week coming up to the election, and I honestly think that could have made the difference. The Trump campaign got a lot of data from these rallies, and I mean, also there's just so much enthusiasm. I mean, these rallies were packed. I mean, we really haven't seen anything like it in modern political history, and these weren't your typical voters. So Trump definitely energized his base with these rallies, and I think that's why you see now that Trump is so insistent on holding rallies. He held his first indoor rally in over 3 months. Even with COVID, I think as Trump realizes that it's worth the risk, politically speaking, and you can disagree with that or agree with that, but I think just Trump really sees that like this is the main thing in it, and I think partly it is to kind of get that in person connection and like get voters out, get voters energized, get the base wanting to vote, but then also just the visual of having it on TV and making his support just look very, very big so that people around the country can look on YouTube or look on TV and see these different rallies. So let's focus in on the state of Minnesota and look at where Trump has to do better. So Trump pretty much maxed out all these rural regions, which he needed to do. I mean, he's winning them consistently by like 60%. I think Biden potentially could do better in these, just because I think he's a better candidate to kind of appeal to the white working class, and Minnesota has a lot of that. Looking at the demographics. However, Trump is going to have to hold. I think places where Trump can potentially gain is in the region of Minneapolis, which, I mean, obviously there was, whole blocks of streets were kind of burned down in the anti-police riots that happened after the death of George Floyd. I've been saying that these kind of protests, some of them have turned violent to turn to riots, could go either way. They could either hurt Trump. I think at first, since Trump didn't, I don't think he responded in the best way. I thought that might hurt him here, and I mean, you saw in the betting odds and in the polls that Trump was sliding. But however, as these protests have kind of gone on longer, I mean, it's been like 60 days straight, and I think in Portland and in Seattle, and even in Minneapolis. I think people are getting tired, and they're fatiguing. And we've seen in states like Wisconsin that the approval rating for the Black Lives Matter protest has gone down. And so I think you could maybe see some people in the suburbs here I think Donald Trump could pick up some votes, but I think it'll be very interesting to us see because I think these are definitely going to fit the profile of the Trump Trump voter. But Trump is also just going to have to max out the rural regions that are kind of his base and do better kind of everywhere here. But he only needs to win 50,000 votes. So even if he wins maybe like 20,000 votes here and then like maxes out all the rural regions and maybe can get like 20,000 here and then maybe in Rochester even it up and do with. But I mean, he probably actually needs to win maybe 30 to 35,000 votes here if he wants a chance to win. All right, so just looking at the recent polls out of Minnesota. So there was a while here from this was kind of early August where I mean it was Biden +5, Biden +3. It was a tie, and I mean people were like really saying, "Look, I mean Trump can win this state." And like it is definitely very winnable for him. There haven't been a ton of polls. Just I mean, we can see. I mean, this is from 2019, but recently there have been a slew of polls that have Biden pretty consistently up by 8, 9 points, and this by no means should Trump be counted out because the polls were exactly like this in 2016, especially in Minnesota. Minnesota wasn't really polled that much at all. But I mean, you can see that in 2016, Trump got 44% of the vote. And I mean, in some of these polls, he's outperforming that margin. I definitely think that there's going to be less third party votes. So if Trump can kind of coalesce his conservative base, maybe even the libertarians too. I mean, he maybe could pick up some of these Gary Johnson, Evan McMullen voters. However, that being said, we're seeing that third party voters and kind of the undecided voters do appear to be breaking towards Biden in like 2-1 margin. So Trump definitely is going to have to improve there. Looking at the 538 model, one thing I think is pretty interesting. So Trump won Michigan in 2016, but we can see that Minnesota is to the right of Michigan. So basically suggesting that Minnesota right now is more winnable than Michigan. And we can see right here that Biden is projected to win by around 7 points. I think it's going to be a little closer than that, but this is already an improvement in the forecast of Trump's chances. And Trump has slid in kind of the last 2 weeks. He was at a 31% chance to win, which is like pretty high, but 17% chance definitely isn't as good. And I think that the why it's changed is because we've had some polls come out. This A plus poll, New York Times poll, had him down by 9, and this A rated poll also had him down by 9. So I think Trump definitely has to make some movement if he wants to win this state. But I definitely think he's still going to hold some rallies here, and he's going to pour some advertising money into here. One thing that I kind of want to look at overall is just kind of show how the electoral map has changed so much. In 1984, which was a landslide for Ronald Reagan, Mondale won. Ronald Reagan won every state except Minnesota, and then the District of Columbia here. So Mondale, the only state that he held on to was his home state of Minnesota. It was the only Democratic stronghold out of the sea of red. So, I mean, Donald Trump has really just kind of changed this completely. I mean, now it's kind of unheard of like a Republican winning, like New York, California, Illinois, where kind of the big population centers are. And like now, but like now, just, I mean, even in the past 10 years, I mean, we're going to see like pretty soon Texas and Minnesota are going to be considered swing states, which I don't think anyone would have predicted before that. So that's just kind of one piece of history that would be very interesting because the last time that a state of Minnesota went red was in 1972 with Richard Nixon and his reelection bid. So just looking at the recent presidential results here, so Trump lost it by 1.5. I mean, it has been close. So this isn't to say that I mean like Trump just did vastly better than past Republicans, because I mean, in Bush's 2000 run, it was a pretty similar margin. But this just goes to show that, I mean, Trump is a different kind of Republican than Mitt Romney or John McCain ever were. One last thing I think was pretty interesting is in 2018, the Republicans, I mean, even though they had a pretty bad midterm election overall, they actually flipped 2 seats from Democrat to Republican, which I think is pretty interesting. These are pretty close, and they actually lost 2 seats. So I mean, this was very interesting. I was kind of trying to do some research to see if any of these states maybe there was a redistricting, redrawing of lines, but there actually wasn't. This was so that I mean, there were only like a handful of seats that the Republicans actually flipped from Democratic from 2016 to 2018. Um, Overall, it was a blue wave, but Minnesota was one of the states. I think it's just kind of changed so much that the Republicans actually flipped some states. So I mean, it's trending towards the right, and if it continues on its trend, then Trump definitely has a chance to win. Lastly, I want to just look at the JHK forecast model. Right now, they have Trump at a 12% chance, so not as good as Nate Silver's 538 rating, and even just like the adjusted polling average and the expert rating, they really don't think Trump has a chance here. And then lastly, I want to look at the if it will load the presidential forecast manipulator to kind of see if each candidate wins, what are their chances to win. So if Minnesota goes red, then JHK forecast says that Trump has an 82.5% chance to win. So if Minnesota goes red, then Trump wins pretty much. And if Minnesota goes blue, then Biden probably wins pretty much. However, if Biden wins Minnesota, then I think Trump definitely still has some paths to victory, especially if he wins like Florida. Florida is a must win for him, and Pennsylvania too. So Minnesota isn't a ride or die state, but if Trump wins Minnesota, then I really don't see a lot of paths to victory for Joe Biden. So there you have it right here. I really hope that y'all liked this video, and please give this video a like and comment what you thought about this video too. Thanks, guys.